Hey guys, my name is Toby and welcome back to another exciting Photoshop tutorial where today we're going to be talking about something which is pretty fundamental to the way Photoshop works, and it is something that you definitely need in your tool belt, so to speak, when you're working on any kind of image, and that is selections. So let's first of all talk about kind of what a selection is. I'm going to go over to the Lasso tool here, which is keyboard shortcut L, and I'm just going to kind of draw a selection. Now, this is going to give you a sort of an area which is surrounded by this sort of black and white moving line, and technically this kind of line is known as marching ants in the industry, if you like, and it's kind of indicating that we have selected an area of our image. Now, the cool thing about this is it's going to limit where we can actually work. So if I take our brush tool, which would be keyboard shortcut B, and start painting with black in here, that's fine until I hit the edge of the selection, where it's now not going to let me work anywhere outside of that. So I could paint over here and it's not going to do anything because we don't have that area selected. So it will kind of limit us in our ability to edit our picture, but it means that we can work on specific areas without affecting other areas. So let me show you a kind of a realistic use of this, if you like. So what we can do is, with our freehand lasso tool, we're just going to draw around my friend's face here, and we're going to go up to filter, pixelate, and mosaic. And what this is going to do is it's going to let us give him a sort of a TV style hide my identity kind of effect, but as you can see, it's not affected the rest of the picture. It's only affected the bit that we asked it to, which is quite cool. And this is kind of just a very simple use of it. You can do all sorts of stuff with this, and it applies to so many different areas of Photoshop that you absolutely need to know how to do this. So let's go into a different image, and we're going to take a look at this picture of this phone. Now, we shot this in the studio a few weeks ago, and it's kind of part of a bigger composite, but for this part we had the phone in a clamp, and unfortunately that is still in the shot, so we're going to try and get rid of that in a moment. But before we do, I thought we'd take a look at each of these selection tools kind of in turn and see kind of how they're useful and why we might want to use them. So let's talk about one of the most basic ones first, which is actually going to be this one here. This is the rectangular marquee tool. By the way, if you ever want to look at more tools, a lot of these icons have more than one tool underneath them. If it has a little arrow in the corner, like all of these do, if you click and hold, it will show you the tools that are kind of underneath that. So in this one, we've got 4 tools, and we're going to look at the top one first, which is keyboard shortcut M, and this will basically let us draw a box selection. And it's quite a cool, well, it's not that cool as a box. Don't know what I'm talking about. But there's a couple of cool things we can do with this to make this a little bit more useful to us. So you might want to draw, let's say, a square. Well, if you hold down Shift and then start drawing, you draw a perfect square. In the same way that if we take the elliptical marquee tool, we can draw sort of ovals and circles, but if we then hold down Shift, we draw a perfect circle, which is quite useful. Now, let's say that we want to draw a circle kind of perfectly around this Z. Well, we can kind of guess, but the problem is that you might need to have a couple of goes at this to get it to go all around and get it to be even. Or what we can do is we can put our mouse right on the middle of it, hold down Alt, and then draw our circle, and it's going to draw out from the center of wherever you click. Now, normally what it does is it will draw from wherever you click, then it kind of becomes one of the edges of the circle. But if you hold down, so this way it's coming out from the edge of where I clicked. If I now hold Alt, it's now coming out from the center of where I clicked, and that works for our rectangular marquee as well. So this way it kind of creates a corner, and then that corner is kind of stuck, or if you hold down Alt, it will come out from the middle. And you can also hold down Alt and Shift at the same time to make a square or a perfect circle that will come out from the center of where you clicked. So that's quite flexible. You can do a fair amount more with that, I find, than you can just by trying to guess a square, because you'll get it wrong. Okay. Now, one of the cool things with these tools is that they all can kind of work together. And you can do that by adding to and removing from your selection. So I know I just said that if you hold Shift or Alt when you're using these first two tools, it will kind of draw in a constrained kind of way. But once you've drawn a selection, once you have any kind of selection, if you hold down Shift, it comes up with a little plus symbol underneath the mouse icon. Now what this means is that if I click and drag, I can actually add to our selection. If I hold down Alt or Option on the Mac, it will actually take away from our selection. So this area is selected and this area isn't. So if I take a white paintbrush, make our brush a little bit bigger, you can kind of draw something that looks a little bit like that, which may not be particularly useful, to be honest. It's not really. So I'm just going to hold Command or Control Alt and Z to go back a few steps. Okay. So you can kind of add to your selections or take away, and you can be, it gives you quite a lot of control. Now the thing is, this will work across tools. So I've drawn a load of stuff with the rectangular one. Now I can actually take away or add to using different selection tools, and this works for every single tool. So let's talk about a different tool quickly. This is the freehand freehand selection tool, which is keyboard shortcut L for Lasso tool. And this basically, oops, no pixel selected. So this will let us draw whatever we want, but if you hold Shift, you can add to, or you can remove from. And you're going to start to notice a theme, I think. The polygonal lasso tool is also keyboard shortcut L. By the way, so let's say we're on this one. If we want to go to the freehand lasso tool without having to push the button, if we hit L, it will go to whatever one is selected. If you hold Shift and then push the same keyboard shortcut, it's going to cycle through the tools that are kind of in that stack. So if we press it enough times, we'll come back round to the freehand one. But we want to go to the next one. So it's Shift L, and we go to the polygonal lasso tool. So with this one, it lets you draw straight lines. Now, when you're drawing, if you hold Shift, it will actually draw kind of constrained lines to 45-degree angles. So you can do sort of perfectly straight and perfectly horizontal lines. Now, it adds a line every time you click, but to finish the selection, you can either mouse over the very first point you made, and it will come up with this little circle next to your icon to say complete your selection. Or if you double click anywhere, it will kind of snap to from wherever you click, and then you've made your selection. Now, once you've made a selection, you can hold Shift. It will give you the little plus symbol under the icon. You can click, and then you can actually let go of Shift, because with this one, if you want to now hold Shift again, it will do the constraining thing again. So you can kind of do that. And if you hold Alt, it will actually temporarily go to a freehand tool. So you can then go back to polygonal, and then hold Alt, and then you can go back to freehand, and then double click and finish your selection. So this is a bit of a mess. If you ever have a selection that you don't want and you need to get rid of it, if you press Command or Control if you're on the PC and D, it will deselect your selection. You can also get to that by going up to Select and Deselect, which is grayed out at the moment because we don't have a selection. But that is one you're going to be using quite a lot, so it might be worth committing that one to memory. It'll save you quite a lot of time, I think. So we've looked at lasso, we've looked at polygonal. Now let's look at magnetic lasso tool, which is the last tool we're going to look at today. And what this tool does is it's quite clever. It will actually kind of find edges of contrast. If you kind of just mouse near where these edges are, and it will automatically kind of lay a selection out kind of where you are. Now the problem is that if you ever accidentally, so it's actually doing almost too good of a job. Okay, so it's made a mistake there that we don't want. So if you need to go back a couple of points, can you see it's adding like little squares kind of along the line? Those are kind of anchor points. So if you hit backspace, it will kind of start to go back and delete anchor points. So now we're back to kind of where we want it to be, and you can kind of keep going. And if you want to add a point manually, because sometimes you can go over and over and over an area and it won't get it, so you can actually just add a point if you want to do that. And you do that just by clicking, and it will kind of add a point. Now to close it off, you can either mouse over the start point again and it will give you a little circle next to your icon, or if you double click, it will snap back to the beginning. So that's quite a good one. And just like the other ones, if you hold down Shift, you can add to and remove from selection. So Now let's use some of these tools together to do a practical job of removing this clamp that we talked about. So let's start with the polygonal lasso tool, and we're going to come down this edge here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, I'm going to click a point on this edge, and I'm just going to kind of scroll down here. Oops. And even though this doesn't have the little squares, in the same way the magnetic lasso tool works, if you hit backspace, it will undo the last point you made. So that's quite a nice one to do if you accidentally click when you didn't mean to. Just backspace, it'll go back one, and then you're good to go. So if you line this up here, you can click, and then we'll just kind of click around, because all we're trying to do is get the edge of this. We're not too worried about getting the whole thing. So come back up to kind of where we started, mouse over the beginning and click, and then we have our first selection. Now, to get the rest of this, I'm actually going to swap to a different tool. I'm going to go to the freehand lasso tool. I'm going to hold down Shift to add to selection. I'm just kind of going to draw through this and around. Now, I didn't get this bit at the top here because we can. I'm going to make sure we get everything on this edge by using the polygonal lasso tool. So I'm going to hold Shift to add to selection, click, drag, and then release. And now we've got all of that added to our selection as well. Now it might be that we don't want a lot of this black space, so we can go back to the freehand lasso tool, hold Alt, and we can just kind of draw around this area. And we can draw around this area here because we don't really need that, and we'll just loop that to get rid of that. And then there's just one last bit that we need to get. So we're going to go to our magnetic lasso tool, and we're going to hold Shift to add to selection, because even though we're not actually adding to this particular continuous line, you can add to selections kind of anywhere. So we can do it separately, but keep it as one kind of constant selection. So I'm going to hold Shift, click, and I'm just going to start to kind of drag along here. We could do this with the polygonal lasso tool, but just in the interest of variety, we're going to do it this way. And we're going to just go over that, click, 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 and then close it up. And now we have our selection made. Now, all we need to do is we're going to go to our paintbrush tool. I'm going to make sure that we have black selected, and I'm just going to paint over this selection here. And we don't have to worry about the phone because we're using a selection. That's done, and now to get rid of it, I'm just going to hit Command D for deselect, and we have our perfectly cut out phone. And yeah, there we go. Nice and tidy. So hopefully that has shown you how you can use selections in your own work. They are useful for a lot more than this. This is quite a simple use of selections. You can do lots of clever things with that, but we'll talk about that more another time. This is just kind of a basic rundown of how selections work and how they work together. The big thing to take away from this that I did not get for a very long time when I first started using Photoshop is that they work together. You can use more than one selection tool for one single selection. And I think that is very important. What I used to have to do was I would have done this with the magnetic lasso tool, and I would have just gone around the whole thing, and it would have taken ages, and I would have messed it up several times and had to kind of start again, and it was a very big pain. So knowing the fact that you can kind of use all of the selection tools kind of all at once with each other is very, very useful, and it will speed up a lot of your work. So I think that is just about going to do it. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Toby, and we'll see you next time.